The first operator dropped without a single sound, a silent hit that tore his helmet off from 800 meters away. And before his body even reached the forest floor, another SEAL collapsed, followed instantly by a third as the ambush unfolded with terrifying precision. The shots came out of nowhere. No muzzle flash, no noise, just clean, invisible death fired from hidden nests buried deep in the thick mountain woods, multiple snipers firing from several positions at once. "Everyone get to cover," Lieutenant Mason Cade shouted into his radio, while his team scrambled behind trees and boulders, rounds slicing the air as if the entire forest had turned against them. But there was no safe place to run. The enemy had locked them in from every direction, overlapping kill lanes, transforming the woods into a deadly arena. Staff Sergeant Rowan Hale pressed her back against a towering pine, her pulse hammering as another round slammed into the bark barely a meter from her face. 6 enemy snipers, some of the deadliest marksmen operating in these peaks, had been killing American operators freely for months. Ghosts who struck and vanished, responsible for more than 24 casualties in 3 months without ever being identified. The SEALs had called them unstoppable. The briefing had warned, "Observe and report, do not engage." Command planned to eliminate them using air power and artillery because facing them directly was considered suicide. But now those snipers had fired first, and waiting for support was no longer an option. Rowan steadied her voice as she raised her radio. "Cade, this is Hale. I can counter them. Give me 2 minutes." "Negative." "Hale," he snapped. "You're intel, not a sniper. Stay down." His transmission cut off as another round forced him to duck. But Rowan didn't need approval. She'd spent 3 years in Army sniper school before moving to intelligence, had made shots most operators couldn't imagine, and she wasn't about to watch good people die because everyone assumed she only processed data. She slung her M110 across her shoulder and moved. What she did over the next 18 minutes would prove that some threats are only unstoppable until the right person decides otherwise. But before we get to how she hunted 6 ghost snipers through the mountain forest, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Because here on Major Tom's Tales, the most dangerous hunter is often the one nobody sees coming. Now, let's dive in. 12 SEALs had been inserted into the mission, assigned to recon and intelligence gathering on hostile movements across the sector. And Rowan Hale, officially the intel specialist, was expected to remain at the command post analyzing data while the real operators went to work. But Rowan Hale was far more than an intel analyst. At 31, she had lived 3 different military careers. First, as an Army sniper who graduated at the top of her class with confirmed kills across 2 deployments, then as a designated marksman instructor training elite units in precision shooting, and later as an intelligence transfer whose analytical skill and deep understanding of sniper doctrine made her essential during counter-sniper missions. Yet, to the SEAL element she accompanied, she was simply the intel girl, the analyst, the one who stayed behind reading reports while they entered the field. None of them had ever asked about her past. They saw the intel insignia on her uniform and jumped to conclusions that were now getting them killed. The team had been pushing through dense mountain timber where pine, oak, and cedar formed a canopy so thick that sunlight barely reached the rocky ledges jutting from the slopes and the deep ravines cutting across the terrain. Perfect ground for snipers, offering hundreds of concealed firing points and long-range sightlines that made any conventional advance nearly hopeless. They were 3 hours into the patrol when the opening shot struck. Petty Officer Blake Trenton had been leading the formation, moving carefully through the brush when a round pierced his helmet and dropped him instantly. The suppressed hit was so soft they barely realized he'd been shot until he collapsed. Then the true barrage followed. Chief Aaron Drevko took a round through the shoulder that spun him sideways into the undergrowth, and Petty Officer Colin Mercer tried to reach him but was hit in the thigh, the bullet shattering his femur. In under 30 seconds, the 12-man element was down to 9 capable fighters, trapped in a forest that had turned into a deadly shooting gallery. Lieutenant Mason Cade tried to form a defense, but every direction they moved had already been pre-sighted. The snipers had mapped every likely position and had probably tracked the team for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to trigger the ambush. "We need immediate air support," Cade shouted into his radio. 6 hostile snipers, positions unknown, were taking heavy casualties. The Ops Center replied that air support was 45 minutes away, Apaches inbound but requiring exact coordinates. Coordinates no one could provide because the shooters were invisible. 45 minutes. At this pace, they wouldn't survive 10. Rowan had been near the center of the formation when the attack started, and her training switched on instantly. She'd been under sniper fire before, had fought in real engagements, and understood exactly how to read a battlefield. While the SEALs scrambled for cover, she was analyzing angles, tracking impact points, and calculating likely shooter positions based on timing and trajectory. She identified the first perch within 2 minutes, a rocky rise 700 meters uphill that provided perfect elevation and concealment. The sniper was likely prone in a shallow natural dip, using vegetation for cover. The second location revealed itself when a faint burst of muzzle gas disturbed pine needles, nearly invisible, but enough for Rowan's trained eye to catch it. Ridgeline, 600 meters northeast, probably behind a fallen log. She keyed her radio. "Cade, I can take these shooters. I'm trained for this." "Hale, stay in your lane," he snapped. "We don't need intel acting like a sniper." Another SEAL screamed as a round tore into his leg. 8 effectives left, with more wounded needing treatment they couldn't give under fire. Rowan made her call. Mason could court-martial her later if they lived long enough. Right now, people were dying, and she was the only one on the field with the ability to stop it. She moved low and fast through the brush, using every fold of terrain to disappear from the very nests she'd already located. Her M110 was the perfect tool for this fight. A semi-auto 7.62 NATO platform, accurate out to 800 meters, suppressed to keep her signature low. It didn't have the brute force of a bolt-action 300 Win Mag, but its speed and reliability made it ideal for these ranges. Rowan found a perch about 30 meters from the pinned SEALs, settling behind a cluster of boulders that offered clean angles on multiple enemy hides while keeping her concealed. She lowered herself into position, slowing her breathing, letting her pulse fall into rhythm until she became completely still. Through the optic, she scanned the rocky rise where she'd placed the first hostile shooter. At first, she saw nothing but stone and brush, but she knew how to look, how to notice the tiny inconsistencies that gave a sniper away. There, a shadow that was perfectly even where nature would never be, a shape that didn't belong to the terrain. The sniper had used a camouflage net blended flawlessly with the rock, a trick that would fool almost anyone. But Rowan Hale wasn't anyone. She ran the numbers. 715 meters. Crosswind about 8 miles per hour drifting left to right, 15 degrees of elevation, warm air around 72 degrees, all of it affecting the round's path. She dialed her scope, compensated for every factor, and aimed where she knew his head would be, slightly offset from the shadow to account for the net. She exhaled, paused, pressed the trigger. The suppressed rifle gave a soft mechanical cough, distinct from the enemy fire. Through the scope, she watched the net jolt, then sag. 1 hostile down, 5 to go. Their fire shifted toward her instantly, rounds cracking overhead and smashing against the stone around her as the enemy tried to bracket her position, pin her, and prevent another shot. Rowan rolled left and slid to a new position 10 meters away before they could lock her in. Sniper school rule number 1. Never fire twice from the same place. Move, shoot, move again. From her new angle, she searched the ridgeline behind the fallen log where the second sniper had been. He had relocated after watching his partner fall, sharper now, cautious. But he made one small mistake. While adjusting to get a clearer angle on Rowan's previous perch, the very top of his ghillie hood rose just a few centimeters above the log. Nearly invisible, but enough. 625 meters. The ridge funneled the wind strangely, so she corrected for the curl, ran the math instantly, and fired. The ghillie suit snapped as the round tore through him. The second sniper dropped. 4 left. The remaining shooters adapted immediately. They stopped firing altogether, trying to melt into the forest and force her to reveal herself first. But silence worked both ways. While they stayed still, Rowan kept moving. She shifted 40 meters downslope into a thick pocket of brush that limited her view, but hid her completely. From here, she couldn't see the whole battlefield, but she could control one crucial lane, the path the enemy would need to flank the SEALs. And she waited. A sniper's strongest weapon was patience. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The SEALs used the lull to treat the wounded and tighten their perimeter. Lieutenant Mason Cade kept calling her on the radio demanding updates, but Rowan ignored him, focused entirely on her sector. Then she saw it. A flick of brown fabric gliding between trees roughly 400 meters away. One of the enemy snipers was repositioning, trying to swing wide and flank the team. Rowan tracked him through her optic, waiting for the exact second he paused long enough to give her a clean opportunity. He was skilled, moving in short bursts, staying tight to cover, exposing himself for no longer than a heartbeat. But even the best make mistakes. He paused behind a tree, raised his binoculars, and for a brief moment his shoulder and part of his head leaned past the trunk. It was all she needed. 430 meters. Simple angle, light wind, perfect shot. She fired, and the sniper collapsed behind the tree. 3 down, 3 left. And now the remaining shooters understood they weren't dealing with a panicked recon element. They were being hunted, and they were already adapting. Rowan caught the muzzle flash before she ever heard the crack. One of the remaining snipers had taken a shot from an angle she hadn't anticipated, the bullet slamming into the tree barely 6 inches from her face and blasting her with shards of bark. She rolled hard to the right as 2 more rounds smashed into the spot she'd occupied a moment earlier, the enemy triangulating her position and trying to box her in with coordinated fire. She needed to move again. She dropped flat and belly-crawled 15 meters through brush that tore at her sleeves, then pushed upslope another 20 meters, lungs burning and rifle clutched tight. She reached a shallow dip behind a fallen tree, now roughly 50 meters offset from where the enemy believed she still was. Through her optic, she scanned the direction the shots had come from and quickly realized that 2 snipers were working as a synchronized pair, trading angles and covering each other's movements. Smart tactics, and far harder to counter. She spotted one first, perched nearly 20 feet high in a massive oak, using the elevation to widen his field of view. It was a brilliant hide, nearly impossible to assault directly, but vulnerable from a very specific angle, and Rowan had just climbed into it. 520 meters. She adjusted upward for height and partial branch obstruction, then fired. Her round punched through the wooden platform beneath him, cut through his torso, and sent him crashing down from the tree. Instantly, the 5th sniper returned fire at the flash of her shot, and even though she was already shifting, His round slammed into her M110 stock, splintering it and sending the rifle spinning from her hands. Rowan snatched it. Quickly inspecting the damage, the weapon still functioned, but the cracked stock meant any heavy recoil could make it fail. She'd have to control her shoulder pressure perfectly from now on. 2 snipers remained, and both now knew her general location. For the next 3 minutes, the fight turned into a brutal, silent duel. Shots meant to pin her down, Rowan repositioning again and again, scanning for movement, reading cover, searching for the tiniest mistake. These 2 were exceptional, some of the best she had ever faced, moving like shadows, using every scrap of terrain and coordinating their actions with absolute discipline. But Rowan held an advantage they didn't know existed. She'd been tracking their rhythm, cataloging their patterns, predicting their decisions through terrain analysis and tactical logic. So, when the 5th sniper slid into what he believed was the perfect flanking lane between 2 boulders, Rowan was already scoped in and waiting. He stepped into view, convinced he was invisible. 380 meters, center mass. A small opening, but enough. She fired, and he dropped instantly. 1 remained, the most skilled of the entire cell. Rowan could tell by how he moved, how he anticipated her adjustments, how he had survived while every teammate had fallen. He was patient, silent, refusing to fire unless he had a guaranteed kill. But Rowan had a problem of her own. She was nearly out of ammo. 3 rounds left, no reserves. She hadn't brought more because, on paper, she was supposed to be nothing more than an intel asset. 1 sniper, 3 bullets. Every shot would have to count. She moved again, climbing upslope toward the area where her calculations suggested the last shooter would position himself. The terrain tightened around her, cliffs rising on one side and a sharp drop on the other, leaving only a handful of viable hides. She checked the first, empty. The second, nothing. That left the third. A natural rock hollow with a perfect commanding view over the valley. If she were the sniper, she would choose that spot every time. Rowan crept upward from below, using dead ground to stay concealed, keeping her body low and her movements slow, shrinking her silhouette as much as humanly possible. When Rowan finally reached a workable angle, she steadied her breathing and swept the hide through her optic. At first she saw nothing, just rock, shadows, and brush, until the faintest flick of movement betrayed the final sniper's position. He was camouflaged so expertly he practically dissolved into the stone, but that tiny shift had given him away. The problem was, she didn't have a clean shot. She could see only the narrowest sliver of what might be his shoulder, half hidden by rock and vegetation. A low probability hit, but it was the only one she had. Rowan ran the numbers. 290 meters. Almost no wind, minimal drift. The real danger wasn't the distance. It was the uncertainty. If she misread the shape, she'd waste a round and expose her location. If she was right but struck rock instead of flesh, the result would be the same. She had to trust her training, her instincts, and the thousands of hours she'd spent behind a scope. She fired. Through her optic, she saw the round connect. The sniper's shoulder jolted violently, but he didn't go down. He was wounded, but still deadly. 2 rounds left. His return fire came instantly, snapping past her position as bullets tore into the dirt she'd been lying on seconds earlier. She rolled aside and realized she couldn't drag this out any longer. No more stalking, no more patience. She had 2 rounds left, and an enemy who now knew her exact location. Rowan broke every rule of sniper doctrine. She charged. She exploded from cover and sprinted uphill toward the hide, rifle ready, weaving between trees for partial protection. The sniper fired and missed, fired again, and the shot passed so close she felt the shockwave against her cheek. She dove behind a boulder 20 meters from his position, chest heaving, adrenaline flooding her system. 1 round left. She could hear him shifting inside the hide, trying to reposition, knowing she was now too close for him to maintain the advantage. Rowan rose, lifted her rifle, and scanned through the optic. There he was, trying to climb from his nest to reach better terrain, his wounded shoulder slowing every movement. Their eyes locked through their scopes for a fraction of a second, a frozen moment where each silently acknowledged the other's skill and the deadly duel they'd been fighting. Respect between warriors, even as one hunted the other. Then Rowan fired her final round. The sniper fell. The forest went still. 18 minutes from the first shot to the last. 6 enemy snipers dead. 0 friendly casualties. Rowan keyed her radio. "Cade, this is Hale. All 6 hostiles neutralized. You're clear to stabilize the wounded and call for extraction." Silence hung for several seconds before Lieutenant Mason Cade finally answered, his voice thick with disbelief. "Hale, did you just take out all 6 of them?" "Affirmative," she replied, "but I'm out of ammo, Winchester." Rowan made her way back down toward the regrouping SEAL element, and when she stepped from the tree line, all 8 surviving operators stared at her as if she'd stepped out of folklore. Cade spoke first. "You want to explain how an intel analyst just eliminated 6 snipers we've been losing men to for 3 months. Rowan slung her damaged rifle behind her and answered calmly, "I'm not just an intel analyst, Lieutenant. I earned Army sniper qualification long before I moved into intel," Rowan said evenly. 3 years in sniper school, 2 combat tours, 43 confirmed kills. I study enemy sniper behavior because I used to be one, but people see the intel patch and assume that's all I bring to the table. Chief Aaron Drevko, clutching his wounded shoulder, gave a strained laugh. 43? Make it 49 now. Those shots you pulled off, Hale, that tree stand kill, that round through the camo net, those weren't just impressive, that was elite-tier precision." Rowan shrugged slightly. "I had good instructors, and those enemy shooters, skilled as they were, made mistakes. They thought I was just another target. They never expected someone to hunt them back." Petty Officer Mira Dalton, the team medic, worked quickly over the wounded. "Whatever your background is," she said, "you saved our lives. We'd all be gone if you hadn't stepped in." While the remaining SEALs secured the perimeter and Dalton stabilized casualties, Rowan moved among them, offering help where she could, her mind already snapping back into intel mode, cataloging enemy hides, memorizing layouts, marking angles, storing details that would shape future missions. "Hale," Lieutenant Mason Cade called out, "come look at this." He stood at the first sniper hide, the rocky shelf where Rowan had taken her opening shot. The dead marksman still lay in place, his camouflage net perfectly arranged. His rifle, a high-grade Russian Dragunov with premium optics, rested beside him. "This guy was a professional," Cade muttered, examining the scene. Pre-marked distance notes on the rock, multiple fallback routes prepared, exit paths planned. These weren't random shooters, these were top-tier operators. Rowan crouched, studying everything. "See the wear on the stock? This rifle's been used heavily, and look here." She ran her finger over small carved lines. Tally marks. He'd logged at least 18 kills. 18 American operators, Cade said quietly. "And you dropped him with a single round through a camo net none of us could even see." They moved on to the second hide, the ridgeline nest tucked behind a fallen log. This one was equally disciplined, with mapped escape routes and pre-sighted lanes. These snipers knew this terrain inside out, Rowan noted. Every contour, every angle, each position reinforcing the next. This wasn't random placement. This was a coordinated cell working like a machine. Until they ran into someone better, Drevko said, limping forward despite the pain. 6 of their best, 1 of ours, and we all know who walked out. As they continued documenting the positions, Petty Officer Trent Rydell, the youngest operator at barely 23, approached Rowan looking unsettled. "Staff Sergeant Hale, I need to say something. Before the mission, I heard guys talking, saying you'd slow us down. Saying an intel analyst in the field was dead weight, and I believed them. I'm sorry." Rowan looked at him calmly. "Rydell, there's no need to apologize for assumptions made without the full picture. People do that. The point isn't guilt. It's understanding that a job title doesn't define someone's whole capability set. I don't advertise my sniper background because I'm building an intel career, but the skills never disappeared." Rydell nodded, still shaken. "Well, you taught all of us something today. Those 6 snipers were considered untouchable. Command called them unstoppable. And you took them out in 18 minutes. 40 minutes after Rowan's final shot, the extraction bird arrived. As the CH-47 Chinook settled into the clearing, the crew chief's eyes widened when he saw the wounded being loaded aboard. "What happened out here?" he yelled over the roar of the rotors. "Enemy sniper ambush!" Cade shouted back. 6 hostiles neutralized by counter-sniper fire. "6!" the crew chief yelled. "How many counter-snipers did you bring?" Cade nodded toward Rowan, who was lifting a wounded operator into the aircraft. "Just 1, and she's technically our intel analyst." The crew chief stared, taking in her slim build, the intel patch on her uniform, the cracked M110 slung over her shoulder. "That analyst took out 6 enemy snipers?" 18 minutes, Drevko added as medics strapped him in. 6 targets, 6 kills, not a single miss. I've been doing this 12 years and I've never seen shooting like that. 8 hours later, back at base, Rowan sat through the longest debrief of her career. The operations center was packed wall to wall. Senior officers, intel teams, sniper instructors, mission planners. Everyone wanted to know how one operator had solved a problem entire units had failed to crack for 3 straight months. Rowan stood before the tactical map and walked them through everything. Each hide, each shot, each angle, each decision made under fire. "The first sniper was positioned right here," Rowan explained, pointing to the rocky rise on the projected map. "He relied on terrain masking and a camo net. I spotted him because the shadow line was wrong. Unnaturally smooth, the angles didn't match the rock." "Shot distance?" asked Master Sergeant Vance Riker, the Marine sniper instructor. 715 meters, Rowan replied. 8-mile-per-hour crosswind. Riker lifted a brow. "And you hit him clean through camo netting you couldn't actually see through." "I estimated where his head should be based on terrain geometry and the angle of his firing lane," Rowan said. "The net offset was about 6 inches left of the shadow, so I adjusted my point of aim accordingly." Riker let out a low whistle. "That's beyond marksmanship. That's tactical reasoning most snipers never reach." Rowan continued breaking down each engagement, her movement cycles, timing, ammo discipline, and shot choices. When she reached the final fight, the uphill charge with only 2 rounds left, several officers exchanged stunned looks. "Staff Sergeant Hale," Colonel Avery Stroud said, "you broke every rule of long-range engagement. Why rush an enemy hide with almost no ammunition?" "Because he was already wounded," Rowan replied. "He knew my exact location, If I stayed at distance, it would have turned into a drawn-out duel I couldn't win with 2 rounds. Pushing in aggressively forced him off balance and made him react to me instead of sticking to his plan. Risky, yes, but the calculated odds were in my favor. Stroud nodded slowly. Assertive action paired with technical precision. That combination is extremely rare. Most snipers stay cautious to the point of paralysis. Most snipers haven't worked in intelligence, Rowan answered. Intel trained me to judge probabilities and act with incomplete data. I blended that with sniper fundamentals: patience when necessary, aggression when required. Lieutenant Commander Holt Renner, the intelligence chief, leaned forward. The hide sites you marked, the documentation you collected, this is gold. You didn't just eliminate the threat, Staff Sergeant. You gathered intelligence that will save lives. That's the fusion of capabilities we need more of. Over the next several days, Rowan's actions spread quickly across the Special Operations community. An intel analyst who eliminated 6 enemy snipers in 18 minutes, using skills no one even knew she possessed because no one had ever bothered to ask. Lieutenant Mason Cade's SEAL team formally requested she be permanently assigned to them. We need someone with your hybrid skill set, Cade told her in a follow-up briefing. You understand intel and you understand tactical execution. That combination is almost impossible to find. But Rowan shook her head. I appreciate the offer, Lieutenant, but I didn't move into intelligence to return to full-time shooting. What I did out there was necessary, but it's not the long-term direction I'm aiming for. Then what are you aiming for? Exactly what I did, Rowan answered. Use intelligence fused with tactical skill. Identify sniper threats before they strike our forces, and, when required, have the authority to remove those threats myself. That conversation became the seed of a brand new role. Counter-sniper operations specialist. Rowan would study enemy sniper behavior, pinpoint high-value shooters, plan counter-sniper missions, and when necessary, execute them personally. 90% intelligence, 10% rifle, the perfect balance of her dual abilities. Her promotion arrived 3 weeks later. Sergeant First Class Rowan Hale, assigned to Joint Special Operations Command's new Counter-Sniper Operations Division. Her first assignment, map hostile sniper activity across the entire theater and design methods to eliminate the threat. She built a tight 5-person team, 2 intel analysts, 3 sniper instructors, and 1 tactical coordinator. Together, they charted enemy sniper movements and uncovered patterns regular units missed because they only saw fragments of the bigger picture. Within 2 months, Rowan's team had identified 3 more sniper cells operating in separate sectors. Using the intelligence they gathered, they coordinated operations that removed 2 cells without firing a single rifle round. Precision artillery struck exactly where Rowan had mapped each hide, guided entirely by her breakdown of enemy movement cycles. But the 3rd sniper cell couldn't be removed from afar. It required boots on the ground. Rowan led a 4-person team into the field, using her deep grasp of sniper doctrine to anticipate the cell's next hide site. They intercepted the 3-man unit mid-relocation, dropping all 3 with synchronized fire before the shooters even realized they were compromised. Her method quickly became doctrine, intelligence-driven counter-sniper warfare, a fusion of analytical pattern mapping and direct tactical precision. Other units began copying her hybrid model, forming their own intel combat fusion teams. But Rowan never forgot those 18 minutes in the mountain forest. 6 enemy shooters who thought they were untouchable, the SEALs who assumed she was only an analyst, and the moment her old skills resurfaced to prove they had never faded at all. The team mounted her cracked rifle in their room with a plaque. SFC Rowan Hale. 6 targets, 18 minutes, 0 margin for error, the analyst who hunted ghosts. And in those mountains where the snipers had ruled for months, American forces finally moved without fear, no longer threatened by hidden rifles in the trees. The danger ended not through air power or massed artillery, but through one woman with a rifle, 18 minutes, and abilities everyone underestimated because they judged her by a patch instead of her capability. 6 months later, Lieutenant Mason Cade visited her office. "I wanted to give you an update," he said. 17 patrols through that sector since you cleared it. 0 casualties, 0 contact. You didn't just take out 6 shooters. You opened a corridor we couldn't touch for months. That's what happens when you remove a strategic threat, Rowan replied, gesturing to her intel map charting sniper activity patterns. Those 6 weren't just marksmen. They were a psychological weapon. Every patrol feared them. Eliminating them removed the danger and the fear behind it. Speaking of which, Mason added, setting a small wooden box on her desk, "I brought you something." Inside was the scope from the first sniper she'd killed, the one under the camouflage net. "We recovered it from his hide, thought you might want it as a reminder." Rowan studied the optic. High grade, customized, meticulously maintained. "He took his craft seriously," she murmured. "Even if we were on opposite ends, I respect that level of dedication." "That's what sets you apart," Mason said. "You recognize skill in your adversary, but you still outthink and outfight them. That's why you're exceptional." The commendations arrived quietly. Classified missions don't earn public praise, but across the special operations world, Rowan Hale's name carried genuine respect. The operator who proved that job labels meant nothing, that capability mattered more than roles, that the quiet professional was often the deadliest presence in the room. She kept working, tracking hostile snipers through intelligence, and when necessary, ending them with precise rifle fire. She trained others to follow her blended approach, shaping a generation of operators who understood that the best answer to a sniper threat wasn't always another sniper. Sometimes it was an analyst who thought like one and could shoot like one too. And Rowan never forgot what those 18 minutes had taught her. Mastery in one domain doesn't disappear just because you shift to another. Skills stack, strengths compound, and the most valuable operators are those who merge disciplines into a single powerful solution. The mountains stayed silent, their forests no longer hiding death in camouflaged nests. The enemy learned that American forces now fielded operators who could track ghosts, see the unseen, and shut down the unstoppable. They learned it from 6 fallen snipers, and from one analyst who proved the deadliest weapon wasn't always the rifle, but the mind guiding it. Trained in analysis and action, capable of patience and precision, Sergeant First Class Rowan Hale was underestimated because of assumptions about what an analyst could do. She shattered those assumptions with 18 minutes of flawless execution and a career proving that potential isn't defined by a job title. The SEALs who fought beside her never judged another operator by insignia again. The enemy shooters who thought themselves invincible learned their mistake too late. And Rowan kept going, quiet, steady, relentless, the analyst who hunted with brains and steel. The warrior who showed that excellence across fields creates abilities far beyond any single discipline. 6 snipers, 18 minutes. One operator who refused to let anyone else define her capabilities. The forest remembered. The SEALs remembered. And every hostile marksman who heard the story learned to fear the operators they couldn't see. The analysts who might be far more than they appeared. The silent professionals whose skills waited, patient and lethal, for the moment they were needed. Unstoppable was just a word. Rowan Hale proved it could be broken with intelligence, precision, and 18 minutes of execution when it mattered most. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales on Major Tom's Tales.